Right, so on the back of that, Freedom Day 2024 marks the 30th anniversary of South Africa's democratic dispensation and also commemorates the nation's first democratic elections on the 27th of April 1994. So this Freedom Day, we're going to be reflecting on the gains as well as some of the challenges of the past 30 years, whilst also envisioning the next. So to take this discussion further, we're going to be joined by retired judge from the South African Constitutional Court, Judge Albie Sachs. We will be exploring constitutionalism and the rule of law in post-apartheid South Africa. Judge Albie, good morning, and thank you for joining us on the SABC at this hour.
And thank you for showing me those wonderful pictures. There I see Kada Asmal waiting to applaud, and Fenny Wallow with that stern voice, order, order. It was such an extraordinary moment. And you know what comes so strongly through to me is that Parliament wasn't just a Parliament, it was the Constitutional Assembly. And it adopted our Constitution. It laid the foundations of continuing the fundamental rights for which people have struggled so long. And for me, that's the enduring aspect. 30 days on, so many problems in this country. There's so much heaviness here. We heard a speaker in front of the union buildings saying, how shocking things are in the municipalities and so on. But we have a constitution, we have free speech, we have elections, our people speak their minds, and that's what comes through to me most strongly 30 years on. We've got a constitution, people have their rights, we've got the constitution through struggle, and people will enjoy their rights through struggle. So those are my opening remarks.
Well, thank you for those opening remarks. Just on the back of that, I mean, South Africa's progressive 1996 constitution was designed to transform a society from apartheid's authoritarian culture and segregation to one that's more equal and free, based on respect for human rights, rule of law and democracy. I wonder if you could talk to the evolution of constitutionalism and the rule of law in South Africa since the transition to democracy.
Well, I think that's where we've been very strong, remarkably strong. We even know about our weaknesses because of our public protector functioning, commanding an investigation into corruption at the highest level, a strong judiciary, great investigative journalism. I'm looking at SABC now with people asking hard questions. It's not like the mouthpiece of the ruling party the way it was for so many decades. So that's the part that's been strong. The part that hasn't been nearly as effective is the transformation of the economic life of the people. I was amazed early on that we were able to get the armies together. The armies that have been trying to kill each other, we got an army. That was amazing. I was very heartened by the fact that housing was given to millions of people, not fantastic housing, but something like 15 million, almost a quarter of the population, moved from very rough informal shacks into proper housing. I was moved by electricity getting out, water getting out. And yet we can't be happy with the situation today, in which there's still inequality on a huge scale. There's still massive unemployment. I wish we could just walk the streets freely and not be so bedeviled by anxiety about violence. So there's so many things that need remedying. But what gives me great heart was, one, we did it. People look at Palestine, Israel today. It seems impossible. We seemed impossible. We got it. We've got a country. We haven't got the society. We've got to use the country to get the society. So those are my second layer of remarks.
And so speaking about the role of constitutional institutions in South Africa, I mean, perhaps you could also speak to us about the challenges in upholding the rule of law in a diverse and transforming society, because that's also come to the fore during these 30 years. Perhaps also on the back of that, the role of the judiciary in shaping democratic institutions and safeguarding those constitutional principles at large.
Yes, so we've got, I think, an outstanding judiciary. I'm not bragging now. I've been off the court for quite a long time. And I read the judgments as they come out, and I'm filled with admiration. It's facing up to new problems that we didn't have at the time. We've got very strong civil society. I think that's absolutely vital. NGOs fighting for the enabling people to achieve their rights. a very lively press that keeps issues alive, and the institutions in Chapter 9, the Independent Electoral Commission. We're having now our 7th elections, free and fair, and for me, what's absolutely vital, and I think I can fairly make this assumption, if the governing party loses, it steps down. If it loses nationally, it will step down unless it can find parties that enable it to stay in office. We don't have to send tanks into the street or 1 million people to go into the square to get a change of government. We can get changes through the democratic process. If there are enough people who support the governing party, then they stay in power nationally, provincially, locally, whatever it might be. So for me, that's the stronger part of our society, if you like, the vibrancy of our democracy. And it gives me great encouragement and heart that just as we overcame what seemed to be absolutely intractable problems to get a country, so we can overcome the problems that we have today. The rule of law is very central to all of that. It's under attack, it's under threat in many ways. But I think South African people want to feel we're living in a country where we have rights under the law, and it doesn't depend upon who's shouting the loudest, who's got the most money, who's got the most political power as to whether you enjoy your rights or not.
Well, Judge Albie, thank you for that, because I actually wanted to look at the issue of judicial independence that has come to the fore, as well as the interpretation and the application of constitutional rights. What's your take on that? Perhaps also reflecting back some of the landmark judgments that have shaped our democracy and also strengthened the relationship between both the judiciary and other branches of government and civil society.
Well, I was 15 years on the court, and I never felt my independence was being challenged in any way. And I often held for those in office, and I held against those in office. I think we entrenched a position where when the Constitutional Court speaks, first it was President Mandela, a hugely important case, accepted the ruling of the court. It was very inconvenient. He had to reconvene Parliament at great expense for something very, very positive. Parliament had asked him to issue proclamations for the local government elections, and we said no. Parliament can't entrust lawmaking to the president. Parliament has to do it itself. When we ruled against a position that President Thabo Mbeki had adopted on antiretrovirals, maybe he wasn't happy, but he accepted. And that the TAC case was a huge landmark case, and I think it saved South Africa. We now have the biggest antiretroviral program in the world. So I think from that point of view, the judiciary has played a central role. It's been independent. It's well known that the judiciary took a very strong position, the Constitutional Court, in relation to the former President Jacob Zuma. Its independence was maintained. It's been criticized and attacked for that. But it did what it was called upon by the Constitution to do. It spoke its judicial mind in relation to the issues as presented to it. So these are all landmark cases in terms of asserting the supremacy of the Constitution. And I think we have a country today because the Constitution is there. We had peoples living in different areas and Bantustans and so on. And the thing that unites us, two things unite us.
Yes.
It's the Constitution and our rugby team.
Well, Judge Albie Sachs, I know that there's so many more questions at this point, but we have run out of time. I'm going to leave the conversation there. Thank you for joining us at this hour. Wishing you and your family, the rest of South Africa, happy Freedom Day. Of course, retired constitutional judge, Judge Albie Sachs, joining us, chatting about constitutionalism and the rule of law in post-apartheid South Africa. This as we celebrate 30 years of democracy and Freedom Day.